welcome to a new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-host, a man who played in his first PPTQ in a very long time, Michael Hinderlocker.
And got crushed, so, good feeling.
Yeah. What's it like to get crushed at Magic for the first time in a long time?
It was like the second time in 2 weeks, so, it wasn't that long.
When did you get crushed before that?
I mean, an RPTQ, so,
Oh, yeah, I forgot that you also got crushed at the RPTQ.
Yeah,
Now I just feel like a dick.
No, it's fine. You're good. I mean, getting crushed is exaggerating things, but, Matt and I registered, like, one of the worst Mardu decks of all time.
Well, he won with one of the he won the PPTQ with one of the worst Mardu decks of all time.
Yeah, he did a good job of drawing the good Mardu cards in the deck, not the ones that we added.
Yeah. So he, played Mardu rather than the deck you built?
Yeah, he drew all the Toolcraft exemplars, and it was really powerful.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
Well, you know what else is powerful is becoming a patron of the show. You can go to patreon.com/ccmtg and support this podcast directly by becoming a patron, starting at $1 or month, $1 per month or more. Anything that you see fit is really appreciated. And we have a lot of new patrons this week, and we always like to give them a little shout out before the show. We have Sammy H, Miles L, Brendan M. Is it Kaio, do you think?
Yeah.
Kaio O, Chris T, Ryan K.A., and Robert T. Thank you so much. It literally made my day that day. I was texting. It was all at once. It was the 2 days following the show coming out, and it meant the world to me. I was texting Michael, probably annoying the crap out of him about this. So,
I mean, it's it's a positive for me as well.
Yeah.
It's, it doesn't bother me to hear that people are
enjoying
the
show.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Sure.
However, that feedback is delivered.
Yeah, it meant the world to me. So thank you everybody who signed up as a patron this week. We really appreciate it. We will be getting wristbands made, new wristbands made in the next couple weeks. Probably in the next month. So look forward to your wristbands coming in the mail. And we really appreciate it. If every person listening to the show just donated $1 per month, Michael and I could quit our jobs and do Magic content full time, and it would be really cool and really fun. So, let's before we move on to our sponsor, don't forget, let's announce that we're doing a Skype call for our $10 or more per month patrons this Sunday night at 7 Eastern time. So shoot me. I'll post a post on the Patreon page, and they'll have the Skype info for me. That way you can add me, and we can do a Skype call, and we'll kind of lay out what that's going to look like. We do an AMA. We'll do some stuff with you guys, and just gives us a chance to literally just sit down and talk with you guys about Magic, answer any questions that you might have, and they're always really fun, and I enjoy them. So look forward to that this Sunday night at 7 Eastern time. I'll make a post on the Patreon, but yeah, don't forget. You can also go to our sponsor at Oasis Games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com. You can get 15% off of your first order by using the code CCMTG at checkout. And you can get 4% off of every order by using the code Would That Be Good. Oasis is an amazing, amazing place to buy Magic cards. If you haven't checked them out, I highly recommend them. They have everything you're going to need. Last week, we gave it a deck to one of our listeners, an entire deck built, and actually just went to Oasis Games, bought all the cards, and had them ship it there. It's that easy. They have everything you need all the time.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a good place to come do business locally, both buying and selling cards. And the web store is available as well for people who are out of the Salt Lake area. It's a good business support. Alex is a really good guy. And yeah, the inventory is pretty extensive.
Well, let's move on to our first segment of the show. Every week on the podcast, we talk about #AlwaysImproving. We believe if we're not getting better, we're getting worse. We believe the same for you. So we just want to be doing what we can to be always improving and try and improve it. Magic's a hard game, and it's hard to be consistently getting better.
It is. It's hard to get better at all sometimes, let alone consistently.
Yeah. But if that's kind of your goal, it does make if you have the mindset to always be trying to improve, it makes improvement a lot easier because it's also really easy to get worse at Magic.
Yeah, it's a funny game. It's the variance makes it sort of hard to quantify what's where you're actually going sometimes, and I think trying to sort of take notes about what's going well and poorly for you is definitely.
So, Michael, what
necessary.
did you do to be always improving this week?
So, I mean, I didn't really play that much good Magic this week in the sense that, I played a little bit and I did okay, but I, did not have the result I wanted. But I was really happy to get to talk with Matt about Magic again for the first time in a while, with him sort of coming back from a break. And we built a Mardu deck together that I did okay with, but he won the PPTQ on Sunday with, and that was really awesome. It's just, I don't know. It felt really good to see someone I like and someone I'd worked with and talked about on a deck win with it. It was really awesome.
Good. I'm also very glad that it happened. So, I mean, I love Matt Kling. For those wondering who Matt is, he's a former co-host of this podcast, one of the original co-hosts, and it's nice to have him back in Magic and playing again. So,
and playing well.
Yeah, definitely.
Mardu is a funny deck, like in the sense that your easiest games are very easy, and every other game is basically impossible in terms of like sequencing and all. You have so many decisions, but I thought he did a really good job of staying focused, and like his in the finals played extremely well and just deserved to win.
Well, for me, I forced myself not to play Magic this weekend. I won a PPTQ last weekend after 3 weekends of top 8ing some really long tournaments. And I just was like, nope, not doing it. It was so funny because Saturday and Sunday came around. My wife's like, "You not playing Magic today?" Like, and I was like, "Well, no. Like, I already won a PPTQ." And she's like, "Well, yeah, but you're not gonna do any Magic." And I was like, "No, let's just hang out." And it was really nice.
Mm-hmm. Magic is really fun, but it's also nice sometimes to not feel like you have to play.
Yeah, and I played.
Like, if you want to play a league.
Yeah, I played Wednesday. I played Tuesday. Like, I had played Magic during the week. It was just a nice weekend off. And I think that it's important to do that sometimes. Oftentimes we play because we feel like we have to play. And I think that's when you put yourself in a position to oftentimes lose.
Well, losers not really have that much fun regardless of how well it's going.
Right,
there have definitely been times where I think I'm playing pretty well, but I'm not really enjoying it. And
yeah, so taking the weekend off was a big boon for me, and I'm excited to possibly play in some PPTQs online. I don't think I have any QPs in like the last, I don't even know how long online, and these 2 months might give me a good chance to like maybe fix that.
Yeah, they're pretty easy to rack up if you just have some time to grind leagues.
Yeah. So hopefully I get a chance to do that, and it was a nice little break. So, and I do feel improved and rejuvenated from it. So, let's move on to our next segment. We have our Patreon question, so our Patreon participation segment where we invite people to ask questions or submit for a Deck Doctor. This week we have a question that says, "Hey guys, I'm getting back into Magic after a few years break, and I'm trying to start playing constructed formats again. The problem is I mostly played Legacy and Limited when I played Magic before, and I find when I look at Modern and Standard, I just don't understand the formats. Any advice y'all could give would be really appreciated. Best wishes, Miles." So Standard and Modern are very different from Legacy right now.
So this is something I can really speak to, given that I distinctly remember this feeling, like in the sense that I still knew like how to play Magic and wasn't terrible at the actual like game mechanics and timing and all that stuff when I came back, having not, so around Dragons of Tarkir or whatever. But when you don't know what any of the cards do and you don't know the interactions and you don't really know what the formats are about, it's kind of weird to... you can't really play them yet. Like when you can choose a deck or whatever, but you're going to probably play it pretty badly, not really knowing what is going on. So I think one of the best ways is to start like trying to consume content, specifically video content. Like if you can watch other people running decks through leagues and talking through lines, you just like get a pretty... Just watching other people play will give you an idea of what games in this format are about relatively quickly.
That was actually the exact same advice that I was going to give. So I have a stream that I do every Tuesday with Quentin, starting this Sunday. I don't know if they'll come out on Sundays, but a weekly video with Michael where we'll playtest and go deep and talk about like a matchup as we're playing it in a best of 5 series. And then there's also a best of 5 series, typically 1 or 2 on Star City Games, as well as league videos on Channel Fireball.
Yeah, all of those are good resources. I think just that, and just being patient, like recognizing that it's just going to take you a while to sort of remember all the cards. Like when they're all new and you're trying to learn, like 6 or 8 sets worth at a time, it's just a lot.
Yeah, that's actually a really key point, is like learning the cards is going to be your biggest boon to success to start out with. Just knowing what you have to play around and stuff like that. Think of it kind of like Limited, in the fact that like there's only going to be so many playable removal spells. There's going to be very few playable combat tricks, and then you have to worry about creature ETBs and like the combo and stuff like that. Just kind of get used to that kind of stuff in Standard. And then as far as Modern goes and getting used to that, I don't have a lot of advice. That format is pretty intense.
It's a little bit deeper, but again, I think just like trying to consume content is probably your best bet. It's hard to play your way back into shape at the very beginning. Like, at least that was my experience. I was struggling to play a lot of Magic right at the beginning because it was just so overwhelming to like not know what any of the cards did, basically.
I actually think that I disagree with that. I think that if you're going to get into Modern right now, I would find a deck that looks sweet to you and go jam it.
What I really mean is I would just be wary of spending a bunch of money when you're not sure how you feel about a format.
And there are other avenues that we won't talk about on the show that you can explore. You could just proxy cards and like play with a friend and like jam games in Modern and like figure out what you like.
Yeah, I think just taking some time and just watching some videos, reading some articles, just trying to do a little bit of learning, it'll really help you with just knowing the cards and knowing what's going on in these formats. I don't think it's too complex, and if you've played before, you don't have the huge learning curve of like how do I actually play Magic. It's more just a matter of getting acclimated and comfortable again. So just plug away at it. It'll take a while, but you'll get there.
All right, let's move on to one of our main segments every week on the show. Oh no, actually, I'm sorry. We actually have a sweeter segment. We have our Card of the Week segment. So every week that we can on the show, we bring you Card of the Week. So we talk about a card that's done well in Magic recently, whether it's in Standard, Modern, Legacy, Pauper, whatever it is, just to highlight a card that's kind of might be overperforming or underrated or, something like that. And this week we want to talk about Oath of Nissa. So we're going to give out a play set of Oath of Nissa to Michael C. from LA. He's one of our patrons. You can be eligible to win this reward by becoming a patron of $3 per month or more. So Michael, just shoot me a message on Facebook or on Patreon. Just a lot of times, some people don't want the cards, but if you want them, shoot me a message and we'll get them sent over to you. But Oath of Nissa is putting in work right now.
It's a kind of a shockingly good card these days. It was pretty hyped when it was coming out, and I felt like for a while it sort of underperformed. It really only ever saw play in green-white tokens. But with Felidar Guardian not getting the axe as of earlier today, this card is absurd in the 4-color combo deck.
So real talk, you can have 0 permanents in play other than 8 lands, and all you need is a green land and a white land, and have a combination of 8, and you can literally top deck an Oath of Nissa, play it, get Guardian, play Guardian, blink Oath, get Saheeli, and win on the spot.
Yeah, so, I've definitely done that once or twice.
Have you really?
Yeah, it's happened. Like, your opponent grinds you out into nothing but hasn't quite killed you. Like, it usually happens where you will, already have an Oath, you've already tried to combo and gotten killed, but your opponent sort of runs out of steam, too. Like, you have a couple of Oath of Chandras or something, and you're both just kind of sitting there.
Right, but I'm talking about, you could have no Oath in play and win.
No, but a lot of the time, you will, top deck a second Oath, or top deck a Guardian, blink an Oath. It's already,
or you top deck the Felidar Guardian.
Yeah, it's really good in that deck. It also helps that it gets, it gets everything but other Oaths and Attune and Harness Lightning.
Right.
It gets every other card in the deck. So, it's pretty crazy. It feels a lot like...
Ponder?
Yeah, I mean, in that vicinity, it's obviously not as good as Ponder, but having a blinkable Ponder's like that is real.
Right, there's upside to it.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning of this format, that was one of the first things I wanted to do. Actually, I like one of our first testing sessions. I kept trying to build Felidar Guardian Oath of Nissa decks.
It's so funny. So for those who don't know, we now every week, Sunday night or Monday morning, somewhere in there, we're doing a power rankings article for the patrons to go deep into the power rankings that I'm publishing. And I literally, when I was talking about 4-color cat, I was like, I don't know how this happened. Like, we tried so many It's so funny because we did the same thing last season, right? For Pro Tour Kaladesh, we tried a bunch of Delirium, Aetherworks, Marvel, Emrakul decks.
So that deck, I think, actually just wouldn't have been good. This deck would have been great at any point. We just didn't quite get there on the intervening pieces. And I also think that some of the decks we were trying to play it against, that it was bad against, like the ramp style decks, ended up being unplayable. So I think we sort of jammed it into some of its worst matchups right at the beginning, and then sort of got off it when it didn't necessarily actually.
Wait, you think some of these rampy decks that I was building are good against this deck?
They felt like it because they were like a bunch of sweepers and stuff, and our versions weren't very tuned. Because you had like a lot of removal spells in those decks, and they were good at killing Felidar Guardian.
Maybe I need to visit that again. Maybe because that deck can easily beat Mardu.
Yeah, it might be the case that those decks are good. They were pretty bad against the green-black decks, but obviously you're probably not going to find a deck that's great against everything.
Maybe we need to revisit that. But Oath of Nissa it does so much. Like, it makes it so that you can play a very wide variety of cards too. Being able to easily play Chandra, Saheeli, and Tamiyo in your deck is pretty powerful.
Well, and that's like the bad mode, right? Like, that's the incidental mode. You'd play it even if it didn't do that.
Right. And then the fact that it also is just this constant effect in play that you can blink is pretty good.
You mostly just you need things that actually flicker for value with Felidar Guardian to play 4 of them. Or else the card is just miserably terrible.
Yeah, do you like 4 of these 2 oaths, 3 oaths of the Chandra variety? Like, what is your current take on this split?
I still like the same pretty stock list that we've been playing. Although Ben Friedman's list from this weekend was really interesting. I think he was playing 2 Attunes, 3 Traverses, only 19 lands with a bunch of Oath of Nissas, as well as 3 main deck Walking Ballistas. I think he top-8'd GP New Jersey, so that was kind of sweet. But some variation of this deck is great. It's also seen some play in in various flavors of green-black.
Yeah.
This card is just really good. The more that you're able to just not play spells in your deck, the more this card is insane.
Well, let's move on to our next segment. Every week on the show, we give you the power rankings. So we give decks points according to their finish in tournaments. This week we're using the 2 GPs in standard. So they get 6 points for first, 5 points for second, 4 points for top 4, and 3 for top 8, 2 for top 16, and 1 for top 32. So let's go in with our number 5 deck. We have coming in with 4 points, 3 of which came, in the final stretch at GP New Jersey. We have Temur Tower.
Temur Tower. I don't know. I've played variations of this a little bit, and I'm just not really sure what your good matchups outside of the 4-color cat deck are.
That's my feeling. I'm going to try it again this week, actually.
So my experience has been you can beat Mardu, but you're certainly not favored.
I'm not sure. I'm going to try. I don't want to give anything definitive. The new versions don't play Rogue Refiner, and I think that's a big help to the deck. Because tapping out for a 3/2 that does nothing but draw you a card really isn't that good in this deck because it's a real control deck. So and I do think that things like Whirler Virtuoso as a 2-of actually fit really well into the deck to give you another sync that's really powerful that's very different than your other energy syncs. So I'm willing to try the new versions that are a lot spell heavier, that play more like real control decks, and with real sideboard options against Mardu vehicles like Ether Meltdown.
Yeah, I think that the just straight blue-red version I might actually like better. I think that just building a control deck that plays Tower rather than an energy control deck might be better.
I've tried Tower and control decks and didn't like it.
But the blue-red deck, I played against one this weekend that just, it seemed well constructed. It made a lot more sense. It felt like your Mardu matchup was actually great as opposed to being pretty bad.
So the next deck I have put in at 5 points, and that's Temur Marvel. This is actually not true. There were actually 2 4-color copycat decks that had 3 or 4 Marvels in them that played Ulamog and just happened to jam the combo inside of them. I probably shouldn't have done that. They're actually really Temur Marvel decks just playing the combo.
I don't think that's true. Those are primarily combo decks that have cut Planeswalkers for Marvel.
For Marvel Ulamog?
Yeah. Which I don't think is necessarily wrong. It has to be good in the 4-color mirror.
Okay.
Right? Don't you figure
I
that you have
I
to
don't
be...
know what... So here's the thing. Is, and we said this last week on the show, I think Marvel is just too powerful of the card, and people have been ignoring it, and each week on the show it's kind of moved up a little bit.
Yeah, I like it better in like the copycat shell as opposed to like the really... People are playing like these Marvel decks with like 4 main deck
why wouldn't you
Aether
just
Meltdowns and like Fumigates and some Nissa's Renewals and that
Oh,
stuff.
none of those decks did well. All of the
Yeah.
Marvel decks that did well were like straight up Temur Marvel.
They were...
like Wooler Virtuoso, Marvel
it's either,
Ulamog decks.
It's either 4-color copycat where you cut the copycat.
No,
and
you
just,
still...
No, but some of
Oh.
them, right, it's either that or it's the copycat deck where you just made slots for like 6 of these spells.
Well, some of them were playing like 4 Marvels, 3 Ulamogs, and Worldbreaker. I think one of them played Worldbreaker.
I think they were sideboarding Worldbreaker.
Oh, that might be it. But they were playing main
Yeah.
deck Ulamogs in the deck.
Yeah, right. No, but so it's either like you cut all the Planeswalkers and like trimmed a little bit here and there. Like a lot of them are playing like one less Felidar Guardian or something. Or I also saw some Temur Marvel decks that are literally just like, we took 4-color, we made it 3-color, but we're still playing like Servant, Rogue Refiner, Whirler, and then we just cut all the combo pieces for 4 Ulamog, 4 Marvel, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of split into those 2 categories.
Here's kind of where I'm going with this. This deck has an insane Mardu matchup. Like, you have to do something wrong to lose to Mardu with Temur. Like
With the Temur Marvel
with
deck?
the Marvel deck, yeah.
The straight Marvel deck. It comes down so much to Whirler Virtuoso. It's a very weird matchup for both this and the 4-color
Well,
deck.
no, because in the Temur straight up Marvel decks, they're also playing like Worldbreaker and like
Sure, but-
Kozilek's Return, and
They're usually not maining the ones that I
they
saw.
actually were
just...
at the GP. I can pull one up.
Okay. So the versions of this that I'd seen a lot of were playing like 2 Dynavolt towers, and then basically just playing 4-color without...
Oh no.
colors.
That's not what these decks were at the GP. I understand your confusion now. Let me pull one up. Okay, so I have the list that took 9th.
Sure.
And I'm just going to read this off really quick. This is the list that took 9th from Barcelona. This one actually doesn't have Worldbreaker in the main at all. I don't even know that it has in this. Oh, it does have one in the 75. But it's 3 Chandra, 4 Servant, 4 Rogue Refiner, 4 Wooler Virtuoso, 4 Ulamog, 2 Tracker, 1 Shielded Ether Thief, 4 Attune with Ether, 4 Harness Lightning, 1 Shock, or 2 Shocks, 4 Ether Works Marvel, 3 Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, 21 lands.
Okay, so you're getting rid of Oath of Nissa because we don't have a way to blink it, and now one of our best cards is an artifact. Right?
Right.
So that makes some sense. Like, these decks, to me, make sense. I don't know that your Mardu matchup is, like, great.
So I played the Jabberwocky version in a couple tournaments that he did well with a month and a half ago. And I went, like, 6-0 against Mardu decks, and none of the games felt close.
Interesting. I mostly have just found that, like, all of these Temur-ish decks...
This deck is so different from the Dynavolt deck, though.
all of... Sorry, Temur-ish meaning, like, this and the 4-color variants.
I see.
You really easy game when you draw Whirler Virtuoso, and it's pretty tricky when you don't. This might be a little bit better in that matchup, I guess, just in that you... in that you're looking at... having like Marvel into Ulamog just as
that's
kind of a
that's unbeatable.
sure, but maybe if you combine that with the Whirlers, your matchup against Mardu's a little bit better.
Yeah,
I mean, my thought with these decks is that they seem like...
I mean, you also have 6 removal spells main, plus Chandra's. I think you have a lot against Mar. I think the matchup is great. I think that's actually one of the reasons to play the deck. It's funny because I think you think that this matchup is better against like the 4-color deck because you like you have like when they don't combo, your plan is like significantly more powerful, and because you can pressure their Saheeli. Is that why you think the matchup is good?
Well, I think that adding shocks to the main deck, like if you're gonna play shock and still play Chandra and still play all the creatures, I get that like your combo doesn't always win the game, but you're so unlikely on a Marvel activation to actually whiff on both Ulamog and removal spell.
Okay.
That I would think it's going to be pretty difficult for them actually to combo you.
Okay.
If you add it to the just straight 4-color version, that has to be good in the mirror, because it seems insane to me. Like, because there are some of the versions, right, where they're literally just playing, they're just playing the copycat deck with a bunch of Marvels and Ulamogs.
Yeah, there were some at GP New Jersey that were just the copycat deck with Marvel and Ulamog.
That has to be favored against the version without any Marvels, in the sense that, like, we didn't cut any of the cards that find the combo. We didn't cut any of the combo. Game 1 is all about the combo, and we just added a way to cast early Ulamogs plus find more pieces of the combo. Right, that feels like it has to...
So are we saying, like, do you believe that Marvel has a place in this metagame that's currently unexplored? Like, people are saying the big 4 decks are Mardu, 4-color Saheeli, Temur Tower, and Green-Black.
Man, you're listening to some generous people. I would say
that's literally why Wizards didn't ban the combo.
I would say it's the big 2 decks.
That's
possibly the only 2 decks.
That's what I would say, but I'm also not Wizards of the Coast who, you know...
Well, right, I don't have an incentive to
not ban cards.
Right, yeah, I mean, given that I can... I actually like this format pretty well. I actually think the games are really good for the most part. The lack of deck diversity is not really something I actually care about at all. So it doesn't really bother me. I'm happy to just play Mardu and 4-color all the time.
Well, let's go to the number 3 deck. We have Green-Black Snake coming in with 12 points. This deck did not look good before Ben Stark got his hands on it.
Well, and Ben Stark, I mean, when you say this deck didn't look good before Ben Stark got his hands on it, do you think Ben Stark drastically improved the deck, or do you think he improved it marginally and played really well?
I think both.
Stark?
I think that there is... I think that Green-Black needed some kind of innovation, and Jund might be the answer to that innovation. And then I think that also Ben Stark is like one of the best Magic players of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this is mostly just Ben Stark being great. And maybe the deck is marginally better. The problem with Green-Black is I don't really know what your good matchups are supposed to be.
So there's a large contingent of players that like specifically didn't want bannings because they were like, well, then you have to ban Snake. And it's like, well, you definitely don't need to ban Snake because Snake's not beating anything right now.
Yeah, I just don't think Green-Black is very good. I don't know what... You're not favored against Mardu. You're not favored against 4-color. And that feels like an awkward place to be.
So what you're saying that it has no good matchups?
I mean, I'm sure you have good draws. Like, it does powerful linear things, but I know that I'd rather be playing 4-color against Green-Black than vice versa, and I know I'd rather be playing Mardu against Green-Black than vice versa.
Okay.
And, I mean, I thought that about Mardu going back to, like...
To the Pro Tour.
To the Pro Tour, so, I mean, I haven't really seen anything that makes me think I should change my mind on that. What is your feeling on those matchups? Like, are you thinking... Would you actually rather play Green-Black?
I don't have... Okay, so I have a hard time believing that the best 2 colors from last year's Standard that only got more cards and good cards would be a bad deck right now.
The problem is you had to cut your best card because it doesn't do anything right now.
Which is what?
Ishkanah, by so much.
So your best couple cards, too, because Kalidas also does nothing right now.
And Liliana.
Right.
You just start. It's not really it's not even a similar deck to what was being played before. It's the same colors. You're playing almost none of the same cards.
Yeah, I mean, like, you basically... I mean, Ben's deck is, like, very different.
So he's built it to play, like, the Greenbelt Rampagers and Longtusk Cubs, and the idea with this is that your best way to beat 4-color, you have to actually be able to attack through their boards, and if you can't put a lot of pressure on them really quickly, they can just turtle up behind a Planeswalker, eventually kind of Baral's expertise you out of the game. that's been my experience against any of the other green-black builds. This build also gets Unlicensed Disintegration, which is very good at killing Planeswalkers, and that looks like what he was going for to me. I can see how that could be powerful, but my experience with this deck has been that you are definitely not favored versus Mardu because you don't have anything to side into. They get to side into a bigger deck that's really good against a deck with like 30 creatures.
His deck looks very tuned, to give him credit. Like, it looks like he knew exactly how many things he wanted of each card, and like that's a pretty big deal to me. I don't know. I have not. I am a rock player at heart and have yet to play the green-black deck in this format.
I just don't think this is the rock deck. I think Mardu is the rock.
Yeah.
This
kind
is,
of true.
This is like the dumb aggro deck of the format. Mardu's the deck that lets you actually play different games. Like,
Yeah,
it's
but
not
I
the- it's not the
really,
colors.
really, really, really hate Paul Rietzel's deck.
What is different?
I like the idea of let's move on. We'll get to it in a minute. Let's go on to the deck with 46 points, the deck that won both GPs, 4-color cat.
Go for it.
I don't understand. I think this is actually the best deck. I know everybody says Mardu is, but I actually think it's this.
No, I think this deck is actually much better than Mardu. I just think that Mardu's actually pretty hard to play, and this deck is much harder to play than Mardu.
Yeah.
Like, much harder.
Yeah, this deck is actually insane. Like, here's the thing: is it's funny because like early on in the format, we were talking about this deck, and we were like, yeah, it's like kind of bad because you like are just like jumbling a bunch of the best cards in the format together, and there's like no cohesion. And now it's gotten to the point where it's like super tuned, and there's like a ton of cohesion. So now it's like the best cards for the deck and the best cards available for the deck all put together into like this very cohesive shell. And there's multiple ways to build it, whether you're like on the Aetherworks Marvel plan, the Planeswalker plan, the Elder Deep Fiend plan, like however you want to play this deck, depending on the format, you can do it. And that's probably too good.
Well, what I remember saying is that people hadn't figured out the best way to build this deck yet. And I remember saying that I didn't think it was the best deck at the time, but that I thought it had the most room for improvement out of any of the decks that were good. And this deck is, like, just gotten really tight for the most part.
Yeah, let's actually compare really quick. So what was the first? Was it Richmond?
I mean, look at Jerry's list from the Pro Tour. Well, that was like the deck's kind of breakout performance.
But it's like the same deck.
Sort of.
All right, so 4-color. Let's look at the 4-color Sealy that top aided the Columbus Open in January. So this deck is like crazy different, right? So I'm just gonna read.
So by crazy different, you just mean terrible.
Oh yeah. So it's 1 Pilgrim's Eye, 1 Virtus Gearhulk, 4 Felidar Guardian, 2 Narim Renegade, 4 Servant of the Conduit, 3 Chandra, 2 Nissa, 4 Saheeli, 1 Terrarian, 3 Harness Lightning, 2 Negate, 3 Oath of Chandra, 2 Oath of Jace, 4 Oath of Nissa, 1 Traverse the Udenwald.
Yeah, so, I mean...
Like, significantly different. And Quarry won with 3 Chandra, 4 Saheeli, 4 Guardian, 4 Refiner, 4 Servant, 2 Tracker, 3 Virtuoso, 4 Attune, 4 Harness Lightning, 3 Chandra, Oath of Chandra, 4 Oath of Nissa.
Which is basically like a stock list at this point, right? I guess compared to the actual stock list, it's -1 Tamiyo, -1 Whirler, +2 Tracker.
Right. That's actually what I was going to say.
But this deck is like, it's not solved, but there's like a very, very cohesive about 52 to 55 cards that like every single person who plays this deck is playing. Right?
Yeah, this deck has it's figured out. But the thing is that even when it's figured out, you can also go and look at the other things that are happening, right? You can still go to those, like you said, Jerry Thompson's version, right? That's playing like Elder Deep Fiends and a couple of Marvels, and then there's like the big Marvel version.
Sure, and Ben Friedman played a 19 land rendition this weekend in top 8 at GP New Jersey. I mean,
yeah,
you could just kind of do like, you can do what you want, but the list in general is pretty tight at this point.
How does he get? So looking at Ben Friedman's list, how does he get Traverse turned on?
Walking Ballista.
Oh, okay.
So this was one of the things that I was actually trying a couple of weeks ago and couldn't quite find the right balance of things. But I have to imagine that Ishkana is insane in the Mardu matchup.
That's actually what I was looking at, is that he got to play both Attune and Traverse. His list actually looks really sweet.
Yeah, the land count is like really scary. Like, 19 lands is
Well, obviously he's hoping that his attunes and his traverses are accounting for, keeping him at 24 mana sources.
Yeah, no, I mean it's just scary to register 19 lands. But I think his deck is a really cool, innovative take. And there's still room for exploration, I think. But we've gotten to the point where when you register about 52 to 55 of these cards, almost no matter what the last 6 or 7 are, as long as they sort of make sense, your deck is going to be great. The flip side is that this deck is actually really challenging.
Well, let's go on to the number 1 deck. No surprise to anybody. Right now, coming in with 54 points, it is Mardu. So between the top 2 decks, they come up with 100 points, and the bottom 3 decks come up with 21 points.
Yeah, I mean, Mardu is really good.
These are also almost all Walking Ballista decks. There was almost no decks not playing Walking Ballista.
Yeah, it's close to solved. I feel like it'll be interesting to see if and how Mardu changes as green-black continues to sort of fall out of favor. I'm curious to see if Mardu can sort of next level itself and allow green-black to be a deck again by moving away from the Planeswalker
or
plan
even
a
if
little bit.
Temur Tower can actually come in and get good matchups against both of those decks.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a combination of tower cards available that's actually good against Mardu.
Why do you think that?
Because you're playing a lot of clunky... You're playing a lot of 3-mana cards against 1-mana 3/2s. It's just awkward.
Okay.
I mean, Tower can win, but I certainly get the impression that it's more that Tower has good draws than good matchups.
I wonder if the correct thing is to play something closer to Bug Tower and then playing Flaying Tendrils.
Maybe. I don't know. I've tried a bunch of weird Tower decks, and none of them were as good as I wanted. They were all really good when I draw Towers, but not too many, and then draw Glimmer. But the problem is
when
that
you draw specifically 2 towers and the Glimmer of Genius.
The problem is
the deck's really good when you do that.
If I hold any other deck to that kind of standard, I generally start seeing it as a bad deck. And this deck super specifically wants the ability to cast Tower on 3, but not being forced into it, and the ability to cast Glimmer on 4, but again, not being forced into it. Which is it's just really specific things to ask for, right?
So what is it about this Mardu version of the deck that is pushing this deck, keeping this deck on top, really? If you really think about it, this deck took the Pro Tour by storm.
Well, I think basically everyone who actually tested it basically figured out that you get to kind of play every card that's most powerful. You get to be the best Heart of Kiran deck, the best Toolcraft Exemplar deck, and the best Gideon deck, plus the best Unlicensed Disintegration deck, plus the best Scrap Heap Scrounger deck. And I just named 5 of the 10 most powerful cards in the format, and they are all great together.
Technically, if you just said, if I were to name the best card in Standard, I would say Gideon. If I were to think of the second best card in Standard,
Heart of Kiran, probably.
It's either Heart of Kiran or Scrap Heap Scrounger.
I mean, I think Heart of Kiran is more powerful, but sure, right? I mean, you're kind of splitting
hairs.
Right.
But that's the thing. That means that they could be 2 and 3, right? So you're already saying that you are the best top 3 cards, and then Toolcraft Exemplar has to be in the top 10 somewhere.
Sure, an Unlicensed definitely is as well.
Probably in the top 10
Stark
somewhere.
Just stuck it in green-black, and it made the deck
better.
Made
the deck better, yeah.
I've been playing a black-red deck online with, Thought-Knot Seers and stuff.
And I thought about Grixis control decks with Tolarian and Renegade map, just so that I could play Unlicensed Disintegration for benefit.
It's really good. It's really good at clearing out Planeswalkers, which are one of the things that these decks can sometimes Vehicles and Scrap Heap Scrounger basically make Wrath of God unplayable. It's a really powerful combo. And then the fact that Heart of Kiran, you get these really stupid sequences, right, where you have a Heart in play and then play Gideon and then kill their Planeswalker and do it without really having to crew it, and then you get to crew it on defense too.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the funniest things is playing the mirror. One of the things you actually have to be careful about is getting too excited about crewing your Heart of Kiran with your Gideon, so you don't lose them both on a single Unlicensed.
So let's wrap this deck up with Michael. What do you think the correct sideboarding plan for this deck is right now?
I don't know. Matt and I were trying some interesting things. I don't know how good they were, but basically, on the play, I want to keep the deck relatively similar to the main deck configuration. We were trying Griff's Boon, which I actually really liked on the play. On the draw, you cut all the Toolcraft exemplars because they don't block. If your opponent has Toolcraft exemplars in the deck, and you have Toolcraft exemplars in the deck, and they go first,
You're going to lose.
You die.
Yeah.
So I usually trim on Scrap Heap Scroungers in the mirror on the draw. I trim on Toolcraft exemplars on the draw.
All of them.
Yeah, preferably. But you're not cutting all the Scroungers. You're probably cutting like one or two.
Okay.
And then it depends on exactly what you have in your sideboard. Release the Gremlins is a funny card in that it's actually so powerful that it kind of inceptions itself. Like it's actually too
I
good.
really, really like the idea of either Avacyn or Obnixilis right now in the sideboard.
We've tried a bunch of Avacins. We're maining 2. It's hard to sideboard into like more than 2 Avacins because it's a 5-drop. And
Yeah,
sometimes
you're
your
actually
opponent goes
specifically
like,
talking about the reason that I don't like the list that Paul played. Here's the thing: is that
Avacin's great until you draw the second one and your opponent goes like Toolcraft, right?
yeah,
But I think that that's just something you have to accept with playing this deck. Like the mirror is really play draw dependent.
yeah. I mean, I actually think that it's very similar to most Gideon decks, right? Like most Gideon decks are that way.
To be fair, the 4-color copycat mirror is play draw dependent in the sense that whoever's on the play in game 1 is hugely advantaged too. So it just is what it is. Like I think as long as it's not like there are decks that are not better on the play than the draw. Every deck is better on the play than the draw. Right? That's just a fact of life. So looking at Paul Rietzel's list specifically, what did you find interesting about it?
So I actually really don't like main deck Avacyn. Like, when Matt Klein showed me your guys' deck list for the weekend, I was like, I was turned off.
It was similar to this in a lot of ways, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you guys were playing like 3 shocks, 1 fatal
3
push.
shocks, 1 fatal push.
And like obviously you guys were playing Pia over
Yeah, Pia over Thalia.
Honestly, like I don't know. So here's my opinion, and it's kind of an unpopular one, but I almost would go back to the blue version of this deck with Metallic Rebuke and Cultivator's Caravan and win that way.
So I have tried
Going back that way?
Yeah, I've played a bunch with lists like that. The biggest problem is that you want Metallic Rebuke most in the mirror when your opponent tries to side up into a bigger deck, especially, or like if they're playing Avacins,
right.
They're playing so they're less aggressive, right? So you get burned less on like Toolcraft, Thraben, kill you, right? Because they're playing like Walking Ballistas, they're playing Avacins, they're siding into this bigger deck. The problem is that you actually can't have Cultivator's Caravan in the deck after sideboarding.
Why?
Because of Release the Gremlins. It's there's hugely...
so many people playing Release right now that you can't go back to that plan anymore.
That's the problem. You are precluded from playing it because your mana is so bad without playing Cultivator's Caravan.
Right.
That
that's
you
the
have
thing.
to.
You're absolutely right, and I hadn't thought about that.
It's super awkward. It's a really weird mirror.
So
the
Mardu vehicles I played this week played. So fun story. I broke Mardu vehicles. I was really excited to present it to the team, and realized about like 6 games in after an opponent was like, "That doesn't work that way." I don't know why it took like so many games, but I was playing the Miner, the 3-1, and I thought that it was an ETB effect. So I literally thought I broke the deck wide open.
That you could just blink it for free?
Yeah, that it was just infinite blink, and also like made it so that I could play 4 Ether Hub for...
Sure.
So like my blue mana was insane, my caravans were insane, like my deck was actually the nuts. And I was like, I broke this deck. We're going to like, I will fly to a GP to play this deck. And then also my deck didn't do anything that I thought it did. But even after that, I kept playing the deck and still thought it was quite fine.
Yeah, the problem is your mirror just gets super awkward. Like, I tried this, and I talked to Chris about this a little bit, but...
You tried Miner too?
No, not Miner, but Blue.
Well, I tried Miner with Blue to increase my energy count to make my mana better.
Right. So, I don't think Miner is probably good enough.
Oh, no, it's probably not, especially since it doesn't do what I thought it did.
Right. But I don't think Caravan works either, which is also why Rietzel has gone to 24 lands. Which Matt and I did as well. The idea being that you frequently want to side into this bigger deck, but you can't play Mana Rocks because one of the places you want to side into the bigger deck is in a matchup where you have to cut artifacts. So you get this sort of awkward tension. A lot of them were actually playing 24 lands in the main deck plus a land in the sideboard.
It's funny that you mentioned earlier that this deck was the rock deck, and Riesel's deck is a rock deck.
Yeah, like
right? His deck is not the deck that top-8'd the Pro Tour.
No, these decks are quite different. They one of the sweetest things about Mardu, and I think the reason to play it, is that if you get good at sideboarding, you can sideboard up and down. And that's not something that every deck is able to do. But being able to sideboard into like a control deck or into a more aggressive deck, depending on the matchups, is really powerful. So you can like actually probably occasionally like trim Avacyn's for more removal spells and board out a land and try to get lower to the ground. Like I think there's a Fatal Push in the board. So you could try to board down on the play sometimes and really look at ending the game quickly. But then on the draw, I believe he has a Needle Spires in his board as well. So you can actually board up to 25 lands and like a ton of Planeswalkers.
Yeah, and then a Sorin.
Yeah, it makes the mirror really interesting, but it also precludes you from playing, like, there's been a big shift away from both Aethersphere Harvester and Cultivator's Caravan, where Harvester was thought to be, like, the mirror breaker for a while. But the problem is that Release the Gremlins is so powerful that I'm actually not sure it's correct to play it at this point, because people are so good. This is really bizarre, but this is sort of what, like, GP level deck building gets to, I think, where like a card can actually be so good that it's bad. Like it's so powerful that you will not play opponents who are.
It's kind of what people thought Reflector Mage were, and they were wrong.
Right, like, but like if you win if you get to like 6 or 7-0 at a GP, you will no longer play opponents who are going to get blown out by Release the Gremlins.
Right. Because
everyone's cut the Aethersphere Harvesters and Sky Sovereigns, despite the fact that they're great in the mirror, because they lose so hard to Release the Gremlins that Release the Gremlins actually becomes a dead card sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually went from 2 to 1 Release of the Gremlins in that Jeskai list that I was playing because of this. It was like I saw so much fewer Cultivators Caravan that I was like, well, I'm not actually willing to board into 2 of these anymore. And at the same time, in the same breath, you could also say that that's also why I cut Radiant Flames from the sideboard entirely. It was like, this is never good anymore. Like the deck has morphed and cannibalized all of the cards that were really good, like Veteran Motorist, right? Like I'm not gonna play freaking Radiant Flames against like a board of
Gideon, Omnixilus, Walking Ballista,
exactly.
Right? With a Scrap Heap Scrounger in the graveyard. It just doesn't work. It's really bizarre, but I think this is one of the coolest things about formats that are slightly less diverse. I know a lot of people really like being able to build, 5 or 6 different decks in the same format, but I think that less diverse formats actually drive innovation within decks in a way that just doesn't happen when you have a really diverse format.
One of my favorite formats of all time was actually the Caw-Blade format, because you got such a huge percentage from knowing how to play Caw-Blade, knowing how to sideboard, having the right cards in the main deck. Like, for example, if you were playing what's the clone artifact card called?
Phyrexian Metamorph?
Yeah, if you were playing Phyrexian Metamorph, you got a huge advantage in the mirror match. They're like Batterskull. You're like, okay, I'll flash in my Batterskull also, and then I will copy Batterskull. And they're like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this format is actually, it sounds weird because it's really a 2-deck format, but there's so much.
So was that format.
But there's so much room for innovation within those 2 decks, and I actually think that, like, generally getting really excited about insanely diverse formats is mostly an excuse to not be willing to work very hard, because the idea is I can play anything, but what that really translates to for most people is I don't want to work hard on the small edges, and the small edges are all that ever wins you games of Magic.
So it's actually funny. That's my argument against bannings typically, is that you're not willing to go out and innovate, so you just want Wizards to do it for you.
The thing is that as soon as you ban things, you just have the same thing, right? I'm sure this format wouldn't be any more diverse with Emrakul and Smuggler's Copter and Reflector Mage. It would just be different and less and still undiverse. It's so funny,
like, that Smuggler's Copter is banned when you, like, really think about it. Like, would red-black Would Red Black be a deck if Smuggler's Copter was in
I
it?
don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. It might be, but like probably not because it probably is the
Is
worst
Fiery
version of
Temper good
Mardu.
in this format?
Is Fiery Temper ever good?
That's what I'm literally asking the question. Like, let's
I mean,
say
the
that
answer is no. Like, in a format where the other removal spells that you cannot
vehicles
tell.
have been discovered if Smuggler's Copter hadn't been banned, like in its current iteration.
I don't know. I think Release the Gremlins actually is the main card that pushed it this direction because that card is so insane in the mirror that.
But what I'm saying is like the 4 veteran motorist.
Oh, you think it would just still be like that?
Well, no, I'm
no,
because
I actually think that Smuggler's Copter would make Walking Ballista better. I think it would have
that's
pushed you towards
true.
Walking Ballista earlier because Walking Ballista then can actually
That would be
crew
so
things.
insane.
Yeah, but, like Walking Ballista is really, really gross if it can actually crew vehicles. The biggest thing holding Walking
Actually,
Ballista
have
back,
no
yeah,
idea how 4-color Sealy could be a deck in that format. Now that I'm thinking,
it
about
would be harder. I think that's the deck that would suffer the most. I mean, I think it would still be fine because it's just really powerful or whatever. But
Well, let's move on. So let's go to our.
sorry, got kind of sidetracked.
We
But it's
did.
interesting to think about.
It is. That was what I wanted. I specifically before the show talked about how I wanted to go deeper on the power rankings. So you guys got a very, very long segment there.
And then we kind of
Talked
hit
about
the
something
bottom
else.
of the pool and kept swimming.
Yeah.
So
Let's go to Training Games Ground. So we actually invite, one of the benefits of being a Patreon is that if you are a supporter of $25 or more per month, you get 2 major benefits. One of them is playtesting sessions. So you can hit up Michael and he will set up a time to playtest with you every single month. And then if I'm available, you can always ask me and I can see if I can set time. Having a baby has made it a little bit harder on me, but I try and make time when I can. But you can always hit up Michael. And then the other benefit is you actually get to come up with the training grounds. And I really, really like the training grounds that Ryan Kendall came up with.
yeah, I mean the hope is always that it's helpful for you. So it's nice to do one that's specifically asked for because ultimately we just want to help you guys and ourselves too in the process.
Yeah. This was my favorite training grounds to write in a long time. But we're going to talk about what information to look for. So, a few things. So Ryan's specific question was, I play all these games of Magic, but I don't know how to process the data. I don't know what I'm getting from these games. And I think that we've all probably felt that way at some point. I know sometimes during Pro Tour sessions for testing, I'm like, what did we just learn?
So I think it's a lot harder when you're working with a format where you're playing decks against other decks and you don't know that any of them are actually decks. Like, it's really hard to play test 2 things against each other when it's possible that they're just actually both bad or one is bad and you can't tell. But that does happen a lot during testing for Pro Tours, and I think just in general, like, if you're not being careful, it's easy to have that happen to you.
Yeah. I completely agree. It is easy to get lost in the weeds, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, like, because you can play games of Magic, but there's a difference between, like, playing games to play and playing games to learn, and sort of understanding when you're playing to win versus when you're playing to get more information, I think is pretty key, right? I mean, if you're playing in a tournament, learning is great and all, but I'll take the result generally.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of start big picture on this, and I kind of want to preface this with, when you're trying to know what information you're supposed to be looking for, one of the key points is to know your goal before the game, whatever you're doing before starting. Here's how I have this written down. I have prioritize learning or winning. You can do both, right? You can learn while you're winning. You can learn while you're like at a GP, but there's priorities there, right? Winning is actually your top priority at a GP.
Well, it's mostly like, so often when I'm playing Magic, I'm reflecting on what I did badly and how I can improve. But, like, generally, unless I had some, eureka moment during a match at, like, a GP, I'm mostly just trying to, like, take a break between rounds and, clear my mind.
Right.
The hope
the
is that
reflective part is after
right.
the GP.
The hope is that I already have a plan. I already know how I want to sideboard. I already know how I'm trying to position myself in all these matchups. Like,
right.
I'm not trying to learn that in the middle of.
But
a GP.
that's the difference between a GP and a playtesting session,
or even like an FNM, depending on
depending
what
on what
you care
what
about.
you care about and what you're looking to do. So the next thing that we have here is just don't just play games. So that's actually applies to both. So don't go through the motions in playtesting. Don't go through the motions in a tournament. Just never just be going through the motions.
So, I mean, I certainly sometimes just play games to play, but it's when I'm, just my goal is literally just to play Magic. Right? I mean, sometimes you just want to play, and that's okay, but you have to understand that, like, it's not necessarily helpful in getting better. Right?
Yeah.
If you're just kind of playing aimlessly, it's like if you decided you wanted to be good at basketball, so you just get a basketball and, shoot it a hoop sometimes. Like, I mean, you'll get better in the sense that, like, you'll probably, remember, like, untap, upkeep, draw. Okay, I probably shouldn't, tap my mana wrong or whatever, but you're not going to, like, learn a lot about the intricacies of how to read a defense.
Let's go to basketball for a second. Just for a second. So, Michael, I used to play basketball every single day. Every day. And I learned a lot. Like, not necessarily from the playing of basketball, but, like, I would go watch basketball. A good example of this is when we were... This was when I got, like, terrible basketball again, but we were playing basketball as a group every week, right? And one week, we were playing, and I had been watching a certain player who was short, like me, and how he would go to the hoop and then kind of put his body back to try and shoot around the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would practice that and try and implement it each week, and I got better at it, and Austin commented on it, right? That is a completely different thing than throwing a ball at a hoop.
Well, and the thing is, you sort of get better doing both, like, in the sense that when you're actually bad, it doesn't take very much to improve. But as you get to the level where, like, you're not like, oh, well, I had planned this turn like Reality Smasher cost 4 mana, but actually it cost 5 mana. I mean, when you get to the point that you're not just like completely...
I don't understand what you're saying there.
Okay, well, you're like, I'm going to cast a Reality Smasher next turn and kill my opponent. And then you're like, oh, I don't have the mana to do so. I thought I had a colorless source, and I don't. So when you get past the level where you're just like, they're just repetition errors, where the mistakes you're making are like, I think I'm sideboarding incorrectly, or I think I'm assessing my role in this matchup wrong, or... things when you start getting to, like, deeper problems rather than just I literally do not understand how to play Magic fundamentally, you need better practice, and better information and better learning from that information than just I'm playing games to play games.
Okay.
Because there is a certain point up to which just playing more will make you better.
One of the things that I worry about is, like, when you sit down from your opponent, like, let's use Moto as an example, because I think this is a really easy trap to fall into on MTGO specifically, where you are literally on a computer clicking F2 and moving your mouse around, right? It's, like, super easy to fall into a trap where you say to yourself, well, this turn I'm playing this land, this turn I'm playing this card, next turn I'm going to play this card, and you go through that motion in your head and don't really think ahead very much. You think ahead one turn, maybe 2 turns. You get tilted when somebody does something in response to what you're doing. And you've played 1,000 games on Moto. It's so easy to just play 1,000 more.
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to do when I'm playing on Magic Online specifically is to literally, like, both keep track of my results in, like, an Excel spreadsheet. And I like to sometimes just make notes while I'm playing.
Interesting. What kind of notes are you taking?
So sometimes I'll just write down, like, cards that I feel like are overperforming relative to my expectation in certain matchups, cards that I feel like are underperforming, whether or not I feel like I, like, have to be on the play or the draw for these cards to work right. Like, I've been playing a deck with Thought-Knot Seers lately and noting how much more powerful they are when I'm going first than when I'm going second. And I think, like, this is sort of when you're playing decks with a lot more consensus knowledge about them, like you can look up other people's Mardu sideboard guides and get a lot of information that way, and that's a good start. But when you're working with less available information, it can be really valuable to like just start trying to create your own information rather than just playing.
So you made me think of a really important story. So for Pro Tour Origins, Team Channel Fireball ended up on this blue-red artifact scissors deck.
That deck was insane for that event, by the way.
It was. It actually was the reason that my deck choice was bad.
Oh, I mean that because that matchup was 100-0.
Yeah, exactly. So for those who don't know, I played green-red Devotion at that tournament. Having an amazing Abzan matchup, a really good green-red, a Tarka red matchup, really good against aggro decks in general, except for the aggro deck that played a flying 5/5 on turn 2.
For 2, yeah. It was like the busted version of Heart of Kirin.
Yeah.
You didn't have to crew it or anything. It was
But here's the thing is that so before the event, PV after the event released an article where he was like he did not believe the deck was good. He was like, all right, we need to know what your win percentage is when you draw scissors and when you don't draw scissors. What is the name of the scissors card, by the way?
It's in Soul Artifact. And
Yeah.
I remember distinctly reading this article.
Yes.
Because I remember what he said was that he thought that he realized that the win percentage was still not good when you didn't draw in Soul Artifact, but then he realized that you had in Soul Artifact like half the time and you won like 90+% of those games.
Yeah,
And was
so,
just like,
so why don't you kind of go over his thought process?
so
there?
he was initially like, oh, this deck is just a cheese deck, right? He's like, so this deck doesn't actually have good matchups. It has good draws. But then what he realized was that your good draw involved basically any draw with an Ensoul Artifact, and you could mulligan for it, and this was the first event where you were allowed to scry on mulligans. So you were able to find this card much more reliably than he thought you would. And as they played it more and more and actually tracked this,
Yeah, so
what he was thinking, right, was that you needed Ensoul Artifact to be competitive. What actually ended up happening was you literally could not lose a game in which you drew Ensoul Artifact.
Yeah, so here's the things that he was tracking. So he was tracking game win percentage with and without Ensoul Artifact, and then games, like percentage of games where you draw Ensoul Artifact, how often you could mulligan into it. So he was tracking all of this data.
And like how much it differed play and
Right.
draw.
Exactly.
But basically, my what I remember the conclusion of this article was they were so good in games where you drew Ensoul Artifact.
It was worth it.
That it just didn't matter that the deck was like pretty bad when you didn't. Because if you could win any percentage of games where you didn't draw Ensoul Artifact, those were just the free rolls, right? You were winning it was like, I mean, to compare to this format, it was like if Saheeli was just always on an empty board. That's basically what Ensoul Artifact was. It was like...
It's probably better than... So for that tournament, it was better than that. So that deck wasn't playable after that tournament.
Because it was really easy to beat if you were trying to beat it.
Right.
But since it was on nobody's radar, if you're not prepared to kill 5/5 artifacts, like there aren't a lot of things that incidentally kill 5/5 artifacts on turn 2. It's just not a thing that happens.
When you think about it this way, so it's funny that I played that green-red deck because it was the best deck going into that Pro Tour for like the last 5 SCGs.
Mm-hmm.
Like before before Origins came out and after Origins came out, it had been dominating the SCG.
It was a good deck.
Yeah, and the thing is like when you think about the other decks, like Siege Rhino Abzan Aggro, like these decks that are historically dominant decks, like they had a bad matchup against this deck. That's why it was so good. And then even like our Tarka Red and the red deck that the guys played, like that I think won that Pro Tour, right? Yoel Larson.
It was the Searing Blood, Abbott deck.
That
right?
deck was better against the deck, but still you had a pretty decent matchup.
Kind of shaky, but a lot of your draws lined up pretty well against Searing Blood type effects.
Yeah, I mean, Searing Blood literally doesn't kill a Sylvan Caryatid.
Right.
And so you had these draws that could beat those decks, and then this deck comes out of nowhere. And when we're talking about don't just play Magic, it's and keeping track of stuff. This is a lot of what we're talking about because he kept track of all of these things, and obviously he's going to do that, right? He's testing for a Pro Tour, but it kind of speaks to what we're going to talk about.
And I think what can happen, one of the big takeaways from this deck specifically, is that sometimes, like, so Green Red Devotion was really good at playing a certain style of game, right? It was good at, like, beating, like, 1-for-1 removal, and it was good at beating decks that were trying to go bigger than it.
Well,
right? Like, in the sense that, like,
trying to go bigger than other decks.
Right, if your opponent is, like, playing Siege Rhino and you're, like, Genesis Hydra for 6...
Right, but they're not trying to go bigger than you. They're trying to go bigger than stuff.
Right. No, but whatever. Like, so
I
if Green Red Devotion can go big, then don't try to beat it by going bigger than it.
Yeah, don't try and Ugin it.
Right. You're not trying to, like, well, I'm going to cast a Genesis Hydra for 7, right? That's not
happening.
We're just kind of smashing heads at that point. Where this deck figured out that, okay, so if Green Red Devotion beats this and people get scared off of Abzan or whatever, get scared off of decks with all these instant speed removal spells because they just don't do anything against, the deck of Genesis Hydras and, Nykthos.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to generate more mana than you. And here's the thing, is that remember this story as we go into this training ground. So let's go on to our next point. We have, in playtesting specifically, don't try and win. What I wrote down here is you aren't trying to prove that you're better than your opponent when you're playtesting.
You're trying to figure out how decks interact. You're trying to figure out what cards are problematic for both decks. You're trying to figure out what cards are overperforming and underperforming in the matchup relative to your expectations. And, like, just generally, you're not... This is something that's really hard when you're first playing with your friends, like, to kind of get. But you're really not trying to... I'm not saying, like, don't make the best plays possible, but you're not trying to get your opponents. Like, if you know specific cards in their deck that no one else is playing and you're playing a stock deck, it doesn't make sense for you to, like, play around them to an extreme degree.
Yeah, this is something that we suffered from a lot in early playtesting and early iterations of our teams for playtesting. There were a few players that did this a lot. Casey did this a lot, Matt did this a lot, and Gavin did this a lot, where they would know my deck list and they would play accordingly. And it wasn't helpful for the playtesting process. And Matt has gotten a lot better at it.
It's hard not to. You have to
it's
walk the line between, like, well, no one's playing Wrath of Gods, so, like, there are things where you don't just play obliviously, right? Like, if you're playing Sealed and your opponent just stops playing spells or whatever, and they're playing white, you're like, okay, well, maybe I should try... he probably doesn't have a Fumigate in his pool. He probably just flooded out or whatever, but I'm going to try to play around it at least a little bit. Right? I'm not going to just, like, jam the 7th creature onto a board where he has 1.
And that's the thing, is, like, in playtesting, cues are important, right? So, for example, if they're just jamming their 5/6 into your 2 3/3s, yeah, they probably have a Wrath Effect, dude.
Right, or a trick or something. Like,
right.
But the trick is not playing around specific cards that don't make sense. You're trying to play sort of generic Magic from one side, right?
Yeah. You're trying to learn about certain things. And that's kind of the next point that we have here is make a list. So, first of all, what do you want to learn? What are we talking about here?
So, the things that I'm looking for generally are, like, what are the games about when I'm winning versus what are they about when I'm losing? So, if I'm playing Mardu against Green-Black, what are the games where I'm losing with Mardu about in the pre-board games? What are the games post-board about where I'm losing? And then what are the games about when I'm winning? Right? And you can, like, if you're able to sort of identify, like, the good cards in the matchup, but also the sequences that blow you out, right? So when they go Whining Constrictor into Rishkar, and then you don't have any kind of removal spell, right? You're just getting killed by that. But it can come down to two, like, so how does that influence your deck building choices? How does that influence the cards you want to play? How does that influence how you sideboard? How does that change when you're on the play? How does that change when you're on the draw?
Yeah. So you're kind of going really big picture. Let's dive deep into those. So, for example, what I make your list is, what do these matchups look like? What are you looking for a number there? Are you looking for a feel? What does that look like when you're trying to decipher that information?
I'm looking more for feel than numbers because it's so hard since not everyone is going to be playing like the exact same 75 that you're testing against. And I think getting really caught up in, like, oh, I'm 60-40 versus this and 60-40 versus this, like, those numbers just aren't going to be as stable as you think they are, especially if you're going into an event with more uncertainty, like an early season event.
So how do you get a feel for it? Like, what are you saying? Like, this feels good, this feels bad, or are you saying something more specific than that?
So I like playing generally to start like 10 pre-board games, because I feel like that gets you, and you can play them quickly, right? You don't have to you can shortcut some things, you can concede when you're getting crushed, you can play 10 games really quickly. With a friend or whatever format, or if you're on Magic Online, you can play, a league with a deck with a relatively limited understanding of how to sideboard and mostly put your focus on how are my game ones feeling. And I like that because it gets you a general idea of what is going well for you or poorly for you in pre-board games, and if you know a player is playing this deck, what kind of hands are you looking to keep? How are you looking to sequence your spells?
You actually kind of touched exactly what I was thinking on. I think next week we're going to do a recap on mulligans, because I think Michael and I might be the closest of any player I've ever done a podcast with on how to mulligan. So I'm very interested to just do a mulligan podcast with you. But one of the huge things that I think gives you a benefit in games 2 and 3 is knowing how to mulligan against your opponent.
So I saw Matt make a very good mulligan this weekend in, I think it was game 2 of his semifinal match against Temur Tower with Mardu, where he had it was game 1, but he knew what his opponent was playing. So he had a hand of Thraben Inspector, Shock, Unlicensed Disintegration, 2 creature lands and 2 other lands. And that's the kind of hand that in a lot of matchups I'm mostly okay with, because I know I'm going to get
1-drop, crack your clue.
I know I'm going to get to play Magic, right?
Right.
And I found with Mardu, one of the big ways I can lose is just not really casting spells. So it's the kind of hand that you look at, and in a lot of game 1s I would be tempted to keep, right? Because it checks a lot of the boxes. I know I'm going to cast spells. I know that basically I'm going to be a participant in this game of Magic, but I'm watching Matt, and Matt thinks about it for a minute and then mulligans, and I thought it was a really great decision, just because it was the kind of hand that, although it's okay on some level, just isn't going to be good enough to beat any kind of a reasonable draw from his opponent. And he can see that. He knows that.
Right.
So I really like that. You're trying to find... so our experience, right, is well, in a lot of matchups, some of those cards are good. But if you're realistically only casting Unlicensed Disintegration on turn 6, Shock is mostly 2 damage to the face, and Thraben Inspector will deal 3 or 4 damage, cantrip, and die to a tower at some point if it's ever relevant.
Right.
It's just not good enough. And I think Matt's 6 was great, and he ended up winning the game pretty easily. But even if he has a bad 6... it's not that he won that made that a good decision. It's that he identified that hand was almost certainly not going to win a game.
Yeah, and you get that from that, from knowing your matchup is what you get that information from, and that has to come from somewhere, right? You don't just know the matchup. You can make assumptions about a matchup early on, but you have to validate those assumptions somewhere.
Right, and I think that playing, especially pre-board games, gives you a really good idea of how you'd like to construct your sideboard, as well as, obviously cards you would like to side out. And I think when you're thinking about building decks, being able to sort of build a 75 rather than build a 60 and then stick 15 cards next to it is really what you're looking for. So, in this matchup post-sideboard, maybe I know that, I have, 6 or 8 cards that really just don't do very much, because I've played a bunch of game 1s, and I'm finding that they're just not... They don't line up well against the way my opponents play, right? It's often against 4-color Saheeli, I was finding... I've been playing a deck with Thought-Knot Seers lately, right? And on the play, Thought-Knot Seer is very good in that matchup because I can take their Chandra or take their Felidar Guardian to bust up their combo or whatever. But on the draw, a lot of the time they're able to play Chandra, and then if I have to Thought-Knot Seer and then it just gets minused on by Chandra. Like, I'm losing the game because that spell is lining up so poorly. And just being able to identify, like, it's not that hard to do, right?
And that's how you make those meaningful mulligan decisions we were talking about.
Right, so you know that, like, if I'm on the draw, maybe I don't sideboard out all my Thought-Knot Seers because they're still good sometimes, but I'm not looking for, like, a hand that is going to need that to survive to do anything.
Ryan, can you hear him? So the next thing that you're looking at, and you kind of touched on this a lot, is cards.
Yeah, so I think that this one is pretty intuitive, but I like to sort of keep track of what cards are overperforming and underperforming, as well as trying to think about not just which cards are, but why they are. So you might have an opponent who is, playing something weird, or your friend is playing around it a lot, or you're getting something that's sort of messing up your data for some reason. But I think it's important to think about both, what is doing well, what's over and underperforming, as well as why. What do you think about how do you try to evaluate cards?
One of the things that I think that I'm looking for when I'm evaluating a card is, like, okay, so for example, this is something we do very early in Pro Tour testing, right? Where it's like, so for example, what was the deck that you had me play at Pro Tour Kaladesh? Like the rug.
The Key to the City, Noose Constrictor, Girapir Orrery, Fiery Temper, Just the Wind deck.
Yeah. So here's our actual learning from that deck, right? Is Key to the City was insane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That part of it was great. And, like, if you're, like, discarding Fiery Temper was super powerful.
Right.
There were parts of the deck that were terrible.
So timeout. That actually is if Smuggler's Copter was never banned, the Key to the City, Smuggler's Copter, Fiery Temper deck, that red-black deck that you hate right now, is actually a deck with those cards together, right?
Sure. Yeah. At the end of the last standard format, that was, like, a deck that people played.
That was good.
Yeah, and it was fairly good. Like, that was at least something you could justify playing, right? So I think this happens a lot in terms of early format, where, like, you're just able to.
This is what I'm looking for, right? What did we learn there? I knew that the deck that you were having me play was bad, right?
Sure, right. I mean, it was goofy, but it let us try a lot of things at the same time.
Right. So what I learned from that is Fiery Temper plus this card is good. And that is an early learning thing that I'm okay with doing.
We also learned that Girapir Orrery was unplayable because even the deck that could discard its hand at will was not using it better than its Mardu opponent or red-black opponent.
Whatever it was. Yeah, exactly. So, because we actually ended up liking... I think from that testing, we put Key to the City in our...
Red-black deck.
Red-black decks.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, though, is, like, let's use the Temur Tower deck as an example. So I played some Void Shatters in Temur Tower just to see why other people were playing them. I immediately knew after a couple of games that it was worse than Disallow, right?
Sure.
But the fact is that was the learning I was looking for. I'm not going to get that learning by playing Disallow. I could get that learning if, like, every time I cast a Disallow, I'm like, is this better than a Void Shatter? But what will really test that learning is having Void Shatter in my deck and saying, could I have disallowed this? Could I have disallowed this? Would I want to disallow in this place? And, like, you have to if you're right or wrong, it could cost you percentage points, but you're actually gaining a learning about cards in those situations.
Well, and this is specifically talking about testing, right? I mean, if you're going to, like, play a GP, play the version that...
This was
right,
a Wednesday
right.
night standard,
So play the version that you think is best if winning is the most important thing. But if you're trying to learn,
which we
then
prefaced
try to
this
learn.
episode with, right? Like, we said, you need to decide at the beginning of this event, are you trying to win or are you trying to learn?
Right. And, I mean, sometimes you do both. It happens. But I mostly think about this in a mostly a play testing context. Generally, when I'm playing almost any event, I want to win or I wouldn't be playing. Right? That's the idea.
So the next thing that we have here is something that you and I also agree strongly on. And that's, like, when you're making that list, like, playing the draw is important. Like, what does the play look like? What does the draw look like? That affects your sideboard. That affects what cards are good. What are we looking for on this play or the draw?
So I'm pretty sure this is the place where I think up to this point, most people who try are able to get to this level. But like sideboarding differently on the play and the draw is really important. Like the Mardu matchup, the Mardu mirror right now is probably the biggest example of this in this current format. But this is true of a lot of decks and a lot of cards in general. Certain cards are just a lot better when you're going first or going second. And the cards that you want in your deck, the role you have in the matchup, like how reactive or proactive you want to be, can change a lot on the play or the draw.
Yeah. So are you looking for that? Is it mostly sideboarding that you're looking for when you're looking at play or the draw?
So it's that. It's also that, like...
For me, it's mulligan decisions.
Right, exactly. Right, like, so Toolcraft Exemplar into Heart of Kiran on the play is really oppressive. On the draw, it's still good. Like, I'm not saying those cards are still objectively powerful, and I'm not saying, like, I just don't want them at all. But I'm much less confident that sequence is going to be backbreaking on the draw. A card like Scrap Heap Scrounger is a lot worse on the draw in general. Like, it doesn't actually matter what matchup I'm playing. If they have creatures.
And so this is the kind of information you're looking for early in playtesting about those situations.
Right. Well, and later in playtesting too, right? Because it informs your sideboarding, your deck building decisions.
Your sideboard building decisions.
Yes.
Well, let's go on to like in events and kind of talk about what the big picture when you're like playing in a major event is. The first thing we have is don't just look at results.
Yeah, this happens a lot, but like... You'll lose matchups that are good and win matchups that are bad, and a lot of it has to do with opponent play skill. Sometimes you'll realize that something you had thought was based on your opponent's either, like, playing against you with extra knowledge or your previous opponent's not being as good as the person you just played against. Like, sometimes you'll sort of have a level-up moment in a large event where you're like, oh, man, I really didn't understand this before, but that person just beat me over the head with it really badly. But basically, I want a plan going in, and I'm going to try to stick to that unless I am 100% sure that my plan was terrible.
The next thing that I have written down is, like, what happened versus common consensus. So this kind of goes with the, like, don't just look at your results thing. But when you look at... So, for example, Jeskai Saheeli is really, really good against Green-Black, right? You could probably lose some number of Green-Black games. And also, if you're doing that, you can challenge common consensus and say, why am I losing with Jeskai Saheeli to Green-Black?
Right. So this is really useful when it's hard to do this in the middle of an event, but like when you're playing and if you're getting different results than people who you generally find to be right, you know, if I'm like reading a Jerry Thompson article or whatever, and he says something that I'm like, oh man, I really don't think that's right. That makes me want to go play that matchup a bunch, right? Because one of us is wrong, and if it's common consensus or it's coming from someone who I think is a lot smarter than me, it's probably me that's wrong, and I want to find out why.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of the same thing, right? If you're playing Jeskai Saheeli and you keep, you know, you're playing a Fumigate deck and you keep losing to Green-Black, there's some evaluation to be done there, right?
Right. Why is this happening to me? And that might like sound weird, but it's true. Like the common consensus from both Green-Black side and the Fumigate side is I should probably be beating Green-Black.
Right. And I think there's a lot to be said for sometimes you're ahead of the curve. Like if you're doing something unusual, that might explain your results. It's not necessarily like it's not necessarily that your opinion can't be right over the opinion of everyone else, but hive mind sample size is really large. So if you're doing the same thing or playing the same list as everyone else and not getting the same results, you should be concerned.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're not necessarily wrong, but it's kind of a warning sign.
It actually works both ways too. So, for example, during the Wolf Run standard, I had top 8 states with Wolf Run, conceding to a friend in the top 8 so that I could go see my wife, and I kept playing Wolf Run. I top 8 PTQs with it. Like I was doing really well with the deck, and I had never lost to the Frights deck, which is the Friends Umbreo Rights deck. So going into a GPT for GP Salt Lake, in Salt Lake, so it was like a PTQ sized GPT. Matt just borrowed my Wolf Run deck and walked in, and he was like, "What are your bad matchups?" And I was like, "You don't have any." He's like, "What about Frights? Like, I don't know how you could possibly beat that deck." I was like, I don't know. I've never lost to that deck. Like, it seems great. Like, blah, 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 blah. Matt beats the deck and then comes up to me afterwards like, that matchup is unwinnable. I have no idea how I won that. That matchup is terrible. You're wrong. Like, you can't win that. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You just beat it. I've never lost to it. The matchup's great. And we had Paulo Vitor Damarosa on our podcast who top-8'd the Pro Tour with the deck like a couple weeks later. And so on the podcast, I said, Paulo, this is a point of contention with us. How do you feel about the Frights matchup with this deck? And he was like, oh, it has to be your worst matchup. And that's what we're talking about, right? Like, Matt and I had literally combined never lost to this deck.
Right, but how much of that is because of the matchup versus how much of that is because your opponents are finding ways to lose? Like, right? It's just that if you've only played 7 or 8 matches and most of them are against players who are worse than you, or, I mean, vice versa, if they're a lot better than you and you're getting crushed.
Or if you got the nut draw with...
Right, some combination of play skill and sample size can really skew individual results.
And draws.
Right,
and variants.
Right, where even if you've played this in 7 or 8 events, right, if you've only played a deck 5 or 6 times, it's just not enough matches to actually have, like, conclusive answers about how it plays out.
Yeah. So, let's go to the next part of this, and we have eliminate feelings. This kind of ties into that a little bit, but what do we mean eliminate feelings? Like, you're in an event, like, you're supposed to just pretend like you have no feelings?
So I think about this a lot because I think it's kind of a trap, but, like, it doesn't actually matter how you win or lose, just that you do win or lose. So, like, the biggest example right now, I'm pretty sure that every article I've read about this and my own personal experience has been that if your opponent, like, taps out for Saheeli on 3... If you're like a creature, if you're basically a sorcery speed deck, you just have to tap out back. You can't actually try to like hold up a removal spell to blow them out because it just doesn't work. You can't get double Stone Rained plus Scryed on every turn for any period of time without just losing.
So but this is interesting. What if you? Because I actually just disagree with you. Not like I believe that you have to make a decision. Can you afford to not tap out this turn? But the idea that like you can never afford not to tap out is just wrong.
So it depends a lot on the deck you're playing. This is mostly in like the 4-color Saheeli Mirror or Mardu versus 4-color Saheeli. Those are the 2 decks that I've played by far the most in this standard.
Okay.
And in the 4-color Saheeli Mirror, if you just don't play a spell, your opponent is not going to try to combo you. They're just going to play another spell and you're going to get buried.
So here's my thought. I think you're right in some sense, and I think you're wrong in some sense. The part I think you're right about is like once you've identified what the correct play is, and you make that play, you can't be mad if they just jam Guardian and you lose, right?
Right. So I guess more what this is about is you have to decide what hand you could beat, and then try to beat it.
Right.
If you're just not realistically like if your plan
if
is
you're not playing a spell for 5 turns and hope that they have nothing. But you could play spells, but you would have to tap out. You're probably wrong. Like, no, you need to you're never beating that.
Right. If your option, so if they have like a Whirler Virtuosa or whatever, so your plan is tap out for Gideon and pressure, or pass and hold up Unlicensed Disintegration, 5 turns in a row without being able to kill their Saheeli. Right. You don't actually have a choice. Your play is tap out for Gideon or tap out for Chandra, or tap out for Rogue Refiner, or whatever it may be. I get that, like, if you have cost-efficient answers and can keep developing your board at the same time, don't kill yourself to it.
Right.
But
okay, so we're on the same page.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, the way you said it was a bit extreme.
Sure. What I really mean is...
saying, like, you can never Stone Rain yourself twice is not true. Like, if you're actually maximizing your mana by, like, saying, no, I'm going to leave this up, and I'm going to do something with my resources this way. Like, for example, if you can play a 1-drop Like, if I can play a Tune with Ether and leave a Harness Lightning, and then next turn, because I did that, I can play Tireless Tracker and leave a Harness Lightning, I'm going to do that.
Sure.
But if I don't have that option, like, I don't have a Harness Lightning, so there's no reason for me to leave up mana, I'm not going to just sit here and, like, do nothing while you play Saheeli into Chandra into Tamiyo and just lose the game.
Right. So my thought is, like, if you actually can, if you both have a Harness Lightning and can make productive plays and hold up Harness Lightning,
Then
this
do it.
this just isn't applying.
Right.
We're not talking about the
Okay,
same situation.
But we have to preface that, because at some point you have to realize that when you say you just can't afford to Stone Rain yourself, if you're maximizing your hand while playing against your opponent's game plan, you're not Stone Raining yourself twice.
Right. No, right.
What you're talking about is a situation where you can't beat the combo, so stop playing around the freaking combo.
Right. Well, and if your plan is hope your opponent just, decides to jam Guardian into your open mana for no reason, and then you kill it and then you play a spell, like, I mean, I guess that could happen.
Right.
It just
the
isn't
important
going
thing
to.
here is that once you've made that decision, once you've decided that you can't beat the combo, don't get mad when they combo.
And I think this happens a lot too. Some decks just like inherently feel bad more than others. I have this experience a lot. Infect is less good now than it was, but sort of I had this experience with Infect a lot, right? Where it felt like all the games I was winning were just like free, like I didn't do anything. And then I would lose all these like close grindy games where it felt like I had, I tried so hard and I just couldn't get there. And that deck always made me feel bad. And then I'd like look at my win percentage and it would be like, really good.
Right.
But it was like the games didn't feel the same, right? The games where I lost felt like they just felt terrible because it was always like I'd made some bad decision that felt
you
like
have to look past the blowouts, right? There's probably nothing more fun in Magic than playing a control deck and like being like turn 1, like turn 2, kill your guy, turn 3, counter your thing, turn 4, counter your thing, turn 5, counter your thing, turn 6, like Torrential Gearhold, counter your thing.
Yeah,
and
turn 7, Glimmer of Genius,
Yeah.
Glimmer of Genius, Glimmer of Genius, Planeswalker, kill your thing,
and it's like, well, I don't know what you were doing that game, but you had zero chance to win, right? The same thing is true of like when you think about like modern, like you're like turn 1 Goblin Guy, turn 2, Burning Tree, Burning Tree, Burning Tree, Burning Tree, Reckless Bushwhacker, like you're dead, and they're like, yeah, I didn't have a chance, and it's like, you have to remove both the feeling and like being like, all right, well, like no one was beating that hand, right?
Well, it's also that win doesn't count extra, right? You don't like get an extra game for beating your opponent so badly that you could have killed them for 70.
Right. I understand that you beat them until next week, but you didn't actually beat them until next week.
Right, but you could lose game 2 and 3, and it's
exactly.
It's no better.
While that game was so bad that you'll be feeling it for a while, it only counts for one game.
Right, and I think that happens a lot. Like, it's hard to remove that bias completely, but it's a good thing to be aware of. I think it happens, too, with Mardu, where, like, the best Mardu hands where you're like, Toolcraft Thraben into Unlicensed your guy, and your opponent's at, like, 6 on your turn 3 with you having, 7 power on board into Gideon or another Unlicensed. Like, yes, it's stupid, but, it's easy to win or lose the games where you get crushed. It's about playing the best you can always. I mean, sometimes it's really easy to play well, sometimes it's impossible to play well, but
let's
what are you going to do?
Let's wrap this up and go back to, well, let's not wrap it up, but let's go back to Ryan's original question. So, like, what is the info I'm looking for? And we wrap this up into 3 major things. 1, cards. What cards are good? What cards are bad? What are the cards?
When are they good? Why are they good?
Right.
How are they good? What are they good against? What could change that would make them bad? Right. I mean, you can go pretty deep on that.
You
if you
can
want
go
to.
as deep as you want on the cards, but it's important to, like, Magic is a game. It's a card game. So, like, what are the cards doing? How are they impacting the game? What's going on there? The next thing that we have is matchups. This is huge. Like, let's say that you lost. The Frights thing is the perfect example, right? Like, we had beaten Frights a bunch of times. We had never lost to the deck. Matt was, like, convinced it was a bad matchup. I was like, I don't know that it's bad because I've never lost to it. But, we bring on the guy that literally top-aided the Pro Tour with the deck, and he's like, yeah, that matchup's terrible.
Right. So then you think about, okay, so
what happened there?
right. So why is this matchup happening the way it is? Is this because my opponents are bad? Is this because I'm good? Is this because I'm trying?
Is this because I'm bad?
New?
Like, what if it's the other way? What if
Right.
I'm losing?
Sure. I mean, but for the sake of the example, right?
Sure.
Is this because I'm doing something different? Did I figure something out? Are my opponents figuring something out? Like what's going on here that is making these matchups play out the way they are? And this kind of ties back into the cards thing, right? I'm sure all kinds of matchups feel different if you're like valuing hands incorrectly, sideboarding incorrectly, right? All of this stuff, if you're making poor choices at every step, all your matchups are going to be weird.
Yeah, and they're going to be very different than that common consensus we talked about. And the next thing that the info you want to be looking for is like, how are you sideboarding? So I think that Michael and I have come to the conclusion that there are some major things that make you better at Magic than your opponent. One is good mulligan decisions, and two is probably correct sideboarding.
So this happens a lot because you can get to be like okay without really being very good at a lot of the skills that are tougher to cultivate. But I was talking to Matt about this yesterday, like when we were driving home from the PPTQ, and we were saying like, okay, so we were talking about like people who clearly are not regularly having to defend their sideboarding decisions and how much worse they are at sideboarding. So I think one of the best things you can do is like find a friend or someone someone you play with and just like argue about how you're supposed to sideboard in matchups, because it should be there's like it's not 100% cut and dry a lot of the time, and in nonlinear decks you have to like be willing to fight for your position a little bit.
This is a real thing. So there have been multiple times where myself or Casey or Austin or you or Quentin, somebody is standing behind another teammate making their sideboard decisions, and the judgment level while that is happening is so high.
And sometimes it just takes like it doesn't have to be like a personal you're terrible thing.
No,
it's just like
it's certainly you not need that, but it's like no, you're wrong.
Why?
Like, here's why I would do this.
Literally just having a conversation about why does this card come out? Why is it bad when I'm on the draw but good when I'm on the play? Yeah. Why is this card bad in this matchup? What is my opponent doing that lines up badly against this? Is
judgment the wrong word? I feel like we're judging the sideboarding. We're not judging each other, but we're definitely judging those decisions.
Well, I want to like debate it. You know what I mean?
No,
it has to be like
turns
productive.
into a debate. Like because you have to either defend your decision or admit you're wrong, right? Either because here's the thing about sideboarding is like you can have a valid reason for why we're different, but at some point there either is a really good reason or like you probably made a mistake. And these mistakes cost you large portions of games. And the thing about playtesting and the information that you're gathering, the thing that Ryan's asking for is, you can read 1,000 sideboard guides, but sometimes those sideboard guides are not going to be right, and you need to make a better decision.
Or they're right, but for reasons that you don't understand. And when the reasons are suddenly slightly different, it's not necessarily that the information was bad.
Release the Gremlins
it's that it's incomplete, right? So like, I've been playing less Release the Gremlins in my Mardu sideboards like ever since Grand Prix. I think it was Utrecht like 2 weeks ago, where the dude won playing 4 Release the Gremlins in the sideboard. That was like the peak of Release the Gremlins insanity, and it was insane for him in that event. But people saw 4 Release the Gremlins in the sideboard and were like, oh, no. I don't want any part of playing against that. It's so good that, like, it actually makes itself worse. Right? And, like, understanding things like that are like, well, maybe my opponent, I only saw Heart of Kirin, so there are, like, less artifacts. Or I don't think my opponent is going to sideboard out their Toolcraft exemplars on the draw because I've talked to them about this matchup, and I just don't think that's what they're doing. Right? Like, everything is adaptable and debatable, and ultimately, I think about this a lot when I'm driving. Like, if pedestrians are getting excited about, like, right-of-way, it's the same thing in Magic. You can be right. You can be right or wrong, but like, if you're a pedestrian, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. You're just dead. So like, don't step out into the street in front of a car. Just like, don't sideboard.
Do you think that non-Utah listeners will understand what you're saying right now?
I think so. I think the idea
in Utah, by the way, pedestrians always have the right of way. So if you hit a pedestrian, it's your fault. But at the same time, like, they died, so it's also like they're bad.
Right. So it's like if you're playing a Mardu and your opponent isn't sideboarding out Toolcraft exemplars, don't get stubborn and be like, well, he's not supposed to have any 1 toughness creatures in his deck, so maybe Walking Ballista isn't good, right? Like, you can be right and still get crushed.
Right.
So ultimately, like...
Which is the perfect example
right.
of the pedestrian thing.
Yeah,
you can be right and still get crushed.
Literally get crushed.
Yeah.
But the goal is to win, right? The goal is not to be right.
And the thing here, and kind of to wrap up the point for you, Ryan, is, you need to come up with a better plan than you did before. So however you want to interpret all this data that we're talking about, right? The matchups, the cards, the play versus the draw, the sideboard. At some point, your takeaway just has to be a better plan than when I sat down earlier. Whether that's through an entire event and it's an outlook on it, whether that's a playtesting session, whether that's a game-by-game basis, did you come away with a better understanding and a better plan than you had when you started that? And that's all you can ask for when you're like trying to get that information.
And I think a lot of high-level Magic is about that. Like, you just have to like, when you sit down and you're playing a deck and you see what's happening, you need to know, okay, so what am I supposed to do? What are they likely to have? How do I play around it? How do I beat it? How do I prioritize my cards? How do I mulligan? And then when it's clear that something is different than you thought it was, how do I adapt to that?
I think oftentimes Magic players are looking for a turnkey solution to getting better at Magic, right? They're like, do these 5 things and suddenly you're going to the Pro Tour. And that's just not how it's going to work for you. And what you have to do is do this again. You have to do it and then go back to the beginning, start over, do it again, and keep improving again and again and again. If you look at my How to Improve a Magic series on YouTube that I did, the last part of how to improve at Magic is rinse and repeat. So you have to literally do it all over again.
Yeah, I mean, I would say basically just like the secret to getting better at Magic is the secret to getting better at everything. Make a game plan and practice, and make sure your practice is good practice.
So that's it. That's it for the Training Grounds. Thank you everybody for listening to that. That was a fun one. I enjoyed that one. Don't forget that you can check out the Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/ccmtg to become a patron of the show. Let's look. Let's give them a good one. So if we go into our Patreon, if you go into our goals, we're gonna skip to. We are currently 40% of the way to paying Danny and Michael for their time on the podcast.
Oh man, that's so exciting. Think about this.
Michael didn't even know this because I just added it.
You could fuel listening to me talk even more than I already do. And wouldn't that be great?
And we are we are 2% of the way to we will build a robot dinosaur for Danny and Michael to ride into battle at each GP they attend.
I mean, I'm going to invite Casey on that too.
I changed it from Danny to Casey. From Casey to Danny.
Well, I'm still in for letting Casey ride the robot dinosaur too.
I mean, if he goes to a GP, he can ride it. But it's a GP dinosaur.
He might go to a GP just to ride the robot dinosaur. And could you really fault him? Like,
to be fair, if you like showed up at your table like on top of a robot dinosaur, do you just get an instant concession?
I mean, does the robot dinosaur threaten your opponent too?
I don't know if that's legal.
I mean
you're not threatening your opponent.
What is the judge going to do?
I don't know. Does the dinosaur breathe fire?
I mean, it at least bites heads.
But yeah, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg, become a patron of the show, starting at $1 or more per month. By the way, we would be really close to building a robot dinosaur if every listener donated just $1. That is how many listeners we have.
That's kind of horrifying.
We have a lot of listeners, man.
We might need to change a goal before more people donate. I wouldn't want to unleash that on the world. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that on me.
You get to ride a robot dinosaur.
Okay, so it would be cool for me, but like if I'm like, donating money to someone, I like.
So as I think about it, as I like think of how other we actually probably do need to raise that goal because like there are lots and lots of Magic content creators that have reached that price point.
Yeah, I don't know what it would actually cost, but it might be more expensive.
And it's also not as funny now that people can't see it. So the goal was $9,001, which isn't as funny because people can't see the goal.
Right. No, I get it.
Yeah. So, you can all let's wrap this up though. Where can people find you, Michael?
You can find me on Facebook. My name is Michael Hinderacher. You can also find me on Twitter at MagicMikeMTG.
You can find me on Facebook at Spencer Stephen Howland. You can find me on Facebook at... Wait, did I say this wrong?
Yeah, but you know that
you can find me on Twitter at Spencer13H. You can find me at Facebook at Spencer Stephen Howland. You can find the show every week on mtgcast.com, constructivecriticism.com, and youtube.com. Shout out to Mason, one of our patrons, who has offered to do a bunch of stuff in exchange for playtesting sessions. So he'll probably be hitting you up soon.
Sweet.
But yeah, he's doing a bunch of stuff for the podcast instead of donating extra money. One of them being editing the shows into YouTube files. You know, showing the deck list that we're talking about, putting stuff at the end. You know, turning them into actual YouTube content. So shout out to him. You can find the podcast and Limited Time Only on YouTube through doing that. Yeah, let's go into the clan. So you can join the clan by messaging me on MTGO at Spencer13Dev or Quentin at Earthstripe. That's URTHSTRYPE. Boom.
Yeah, spelled correctly and correctly. That's right.
Yeah, got there.
I think I should probably message you. I don't think I'm part of the clan.
That could be true.
But
so, which by the way, so sometimes I'm logged into Moto for like 50 hours at a time because I just like leave it open on my computer. So if I ignore your message, I'm not actually ignoring you. I'm just not at my computer.
Sure.
Just so people know. So like, always message me. I'm happy to. I will respond. I don't know if you'll ever see it because like Moto sucks and doesn't save your messages. But if you message me wanting to get out of the clan, that will happen. So. Hashtag would that be good? Hashtag would that be good is our Twitter outreach program. If you tweet it, we'll read it, as Michael likes us to say. And
it just sounds catchy. I mean, who doesn't like that? But it's also kind of a dangerous thing to say. Like, you should really say, if you tweet it, we'll read it, asterisk.
Yeah. So there are a lot of hashtag would that be goods this week.
And are they great?
Are they great? I mean, they could be good. I'm not sure. So we have oh man, like what day did this start? There's so many.
So it should be like 6th? The 6th, yeah.
All right, let's do this. All right, so we have just finished Spike Feed MTG, now listening to CCMTG with First Strike Pod queued up next. Hashtag MTG, hashtag would that be good, hashtag give these guys more spoiler cards. I would love a spoiler Wizards. I know that there are people at Wizards listening to the podcast. Yeah, we would love one. We have a lot of listeners that love the show. I feel like we're super pro MTGO. We're super pro Wizards. I don't know what we would need. We're like one of the longest running Magic podcasts out there right now. I don't know.
Yeah, they just know I can't keep a secret. It's fine.
You wouldn't know until the podcast. It would be me. I would be.
Well, they know you can't keep a secret either. It's fine.
It's not true, Wizards. I can.
Debatable.
But yeah, if you guys want to give us a spoiler, we'd be happy to have one. If not, we're gonna keep doing the podcast anyway. Yeah,
that's like kind of it's a crappy long con.
Yeah. Tron Mindslave Storm and then combos in their stead. Hashtag would be good. Oh man, grave shotting themselves. That'd be great.
Yeah. I mean,
that would be good. I hope that you got video or screenshot evidence of that happening.
The real question is, how good is it to play Mindslaver in Tron? And I'm less convinced. But like for the story, yeah, it would be great.
New Final Fantasy TCG hashtag would that be good? I have no idea. I don't know anything about this. Wait, were we tweeted about this once? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know anything about Final Fantasy. I've actually never played a Final Fantasy game, so
that does not surprise me.
Yeah. So
I don't know, Jason.
I'm
Jason,
prepared
you let
for
us know. That's at Jason SAPD. Yeah, you let us know if it's good. Think Twice back tonight after dinner with Spencer13H and Quentin Pierce at twitch.tv/ccmtg. That's every Tuesday.
And was it good?
It was fun. We got crushed playing Jeskai. We got hit by some variants. So we played against a deck that was playing 4 Void Shatter, 4 Disallow, 4 Negates in the main.
Get wrecked.
Yeah, that match wasn't close.
Sure. Yeah, the old you think you're a control deck? I'll show you what a control deck is.
Yeah. He literally countered every spell we played, as far as I can remember.
Sounds great. I mean, I'm always tempted to do that. Like
It's
every
like,
time at the
and
beginning,
4 torrential gearhulks, and I was just like, yeah.
every
like,
time at the beginning of a format, I'm always like tempted to build those decks just because, like, why? I don't know. It
I
sounds
don't know
great.
either. That's a lot of cancels. But it was fun, and then we got to play Pauper for like the last round for like round 5 because we dropped, and I gotta combo people with my Kiln Fiend deck, and that was fun. So yeah, you can check it out tomorrow or today, depending on when you're listening, or yesterday, depending on when you're listening. But yeah, every Tuesday, Quentin and I we're back with a Think Twice stream. Think Twice is a funny joke because there's 2 of us. So we have to think twice about all of our plays. Ha 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 ha.
Figured it out. You probably should have been playing Think Twice against that guy with all the negates.
That would have been
and-
powerful.
Yeah.
You can tell he void shatters it.
Well, until he's playing Think Twice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If he was playing those cards, he'd definitely play Think Twice.
Disneyland giving C-3PO a red arm on Star Tours. Hashtag with a big good. P.S. About to write Star Tours. P.P.S. Spencer 813H, eat your heart out. So for those who don't know, I'm a huge, huge Star Wars fan. Star Tours is a ride at Disneyland that I love very, very much.
So explain this tweet to me. What does any of this mean?
Okay, so C-3PO is the gold droid from Star Wars.
Right. Okay. So I know that.
Okay, so in The Force Awakens, he suddenly has a red arm, which he got. That's a really long story that comes from a comic book where basically like it was acid rain, and like the only thing that was left over was the droid's arm. So he like wore the droid's arm to like show remembrance of this droid that died to save his life. And anyway, so spoiler alert. And then Star Tours is a ride at Disneyland.
Okay.
That is probably I don't know if the Star Wars land has been put into Disneyland yet, but that's where it's going to be. It's where Tomorrowland was.
Okay.
And then the Eat Your Heart Out is because he knows how much I love Star Wars. So
Very
obviously
good.
I'm jealous of him.
Okay. I get it.
I think we are all caught up on Card of the Week for at CCMTG. If you haven't gotten yours by next week, let us know. Hashtag be good. Please let me know. I think they're all sent out. The wristbands are still... We have to go buy some, but we'll get them sent out to everybody from, I think, January, February, and March. So we'll get those sent out to you guys probably next month. Having your primary deck at Eternal Card Game not get any nerfs, and your secondary deck get a buff in the latest patch, would that be good? I don't know. I don't play Eternal anymore.
Yeah, that's why I don't like digital games.
It's why you don't like them?
Yeah.
So it's actually funny, because if they could just nerf Felidar Guardian to just not blink...
So it's true,
Planeswalkers.
but at the same time, like, it's really annoying when you've worked or like bought some deck to play on whatever game you're playing, and then they're just like, "Yeah, this deck's too good, nerf it."
Yeah. So
Like,
here's
so-
the thing.
so with
Hearthstone
bans-
has nerfed every aggressive creature that's been good ever.
I vaguely remember playing, like, I hadn't played for a while, right? So I haven't played Hearthstone now in over a year, but there was a brief period where I was playing it semi-regularly, and I was playing, I think it was the Hunter deck back when there was like something that drew a card every time you played a beast. So you'd like go through these like semi-combo turns and then kill your opponent, generally involving Leroy Jenkins. And they just like nerfed every single card in the deck, and I like logged on.
Just up Leroy Jenkins' mana cost, dude.
Sure, but he got like a lot worse. I think he did something worse too.
Well,
But
yeah, because he cost 5 instead of 4.
Yeah, and then they changed the functionality of one of the other cards in the deck too. So like I hadn't logged on in a few months, and I logged on and like played a game and was really confused for a while because I was just getting crushed and like didn't remember why I thought this deck was good before. So then I like looked on the internet and found out that, you know, the deck I was trying to play like wasn't actually a deck anymore.
Yeah.
It's just like kind of like if you're going to ban something, just ban it.
I played a lot of Combo Druid in my life, and let me tell you, I'm pretty upset that I don't get to play Combo Druid in Hearthstone anymore.
I don't like the pseudo ban.
We have at Kesher Rose. I have some very serious questions that need answer. I feel only you can give. What is the best Starburst color? Hashtag would that be good? She has not yet answered, but if every listener of the show that has a Twitter account could favorite this and ask her to answer it, I think it would. We would deserve a spoiler card after that.
Yeah, see, the problem is that I wouldn't trust Kesha to tell me what the best Starburst color was, so...
A shots fired?
Yeah. Just, it doesn't really matter.
Her opinion doesn't matter to you.
Should it?
I think it should because she's the voice of a generation.
I thought that was Casey.
At CCMTG, at the Spencer 13H. Good summary of the issue with Standard right now. Hashtag would be good if Wizard of the Coast follow through and ban Felidar. So I did a video called Ban Copycat, ? And I just talked about why they should ban Copycat. And
so I think that the card is really bad for the format, but I actually really love this format. So I don't know. I really like the 2-deck format.
I don't. Here's the thing: is that I actually think that they ban cards in the best Standard format of all time. I believe that the Emrakul format was the best Standard format ever, and they banned cards in it. And I think that this format's. So here's the thing: is that nothing ever will be as bad as Green White tokens.
It's true. That deck was really boring.
Like
and really
that was
good.
the worst Standard format I've ever played in, and
both Mardu and 4-color are actually like really difficult.
Yeah. And then that went into like the Bant like bullcrap deck. So like it was just a really bad year for Standard. I don't mind this one as much. Like I've had fun. I think that the games are interesting.
They are. They're hard too. They are hard.
Which is a lot to say. I know that in the past, like these super hard, interesting formats, such as Callblade, have been banned. But I don't know. I'm not upset that they didn't ban anything. It just means that I have to get to work. So,
yeah, I like when getting to work involves more playing and less brewing.
Yeah,
more fun.
I think that it involves both in this. I think that if you could break this format, you would go win a GP.
Sure, but I think if you could just learn to play Mardu really well, you'd probably win a GP too.
Sure. I miss Lotus Cobra every day of my life. Can we get it in Standard again? Hashtag MDG. Hashtag was it good? I wish I could see the timestamp on this tweet because this is me.
3 a.m.
It has to be 2:04 p.m. That's embarrassing.
Oh, man.
All right. Well,
you should have just said a.m.
I'm going to be honest, man. Transparency. I do miss Lotus Cobra every day.
Yeah, I would introduce Lotus Cobra to Walking Ballista so fast.
Why do you got to do that to me?
Get that snake out of here.
When you get some time away from your final year to write a weekly article for the first time in a month, hashtag whether be good, hashtag Friday Finance, hashtag CCMTG. For those who don't know, Alex Kirby at MTG Kirby writes a weekly finance article for Constructive Criticism. If you just go to constructivecriticism.com, check the article section, you can see every week, and we appreciate it. And they're really cool and really interesting. He does some hot takes at the end of the article every week to kind of tell you like what you could buy, what you could sell. So super interesting. So check it out every week on constructivecriticism.com. At Spencer13H, I'm praying for a bunch of unbans tomorrow. Hashtag whether be good, hashtag MDG, hashtag modern. I would have unbanned Bloodbright Elf, Preordain, and Jace the Mind Sculptor. Obviously, as we've mentioned on this podcast, no changes in any format.
Everything but Mental Misstep. Unban it all.
That sounds so terrible.
Does it?
It really does.
Well, we don't know yet. How can you say that?
Oh no, we have a Bachelor tweet. At Vial Nicholas 28, probably plays Belcher in Legacy since he hates himself and fun. Only reason to pick Vanessa. Hashtag would that be good?
Man. I would say
hashtag
that's like
spoiler alert.
I would say that's Manaless Dredge. Because Belcher, at least you hate everyone else too.
I appreciate the increase in Bachelor related content.
Yeah, Mason single-handedly driving the bus, and I approve.
Do you think Mason has a nanny?
No, but I bet he wishes he did.
So
because he's a rational human being.
Mason's birthday was this week, and the joke is that Mason is really Austin. Like, he's just fake Austin because he's always talking about how we should invite Austin.
No, he's way
podcast.
nicer than Austin.
So that's the thing. That's why he's fake Austin, right? He's Austin's, like, altered. I actually have a fake Facebook account that trolls different podcasts and stuff like that. So it's not me. Real talk, I really do. You'll never know who it is, but I think, and so for a long time, like everything that Mason said was like, bring on Austin onto the podcast. I was like, all right, well, you're just Austin. Like, I'm not stupid. So this week was Mason's birthday, and so I posted on Austin's Facebook wall, and I was like, happy fake birthday Austin, and I tagged Mason in it, and it made my day.
Oh, I saw that, but I didn't realize it was on Austin's wall, which makes it funnier.
It was really. I thought it was hysterical. I laughed at myself for at least 5 minutes. Yeah. So I have no idea why Nick chose who he chose. I didn't watch the episode because like we record the podcast during The Bachelor, so I just looked at spoilers and was like, well, this is the dumbest season ever again. You know. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of just a bad show concept, honestly. It's amusing. It's just like, man, I really don't think I'd ever want to be on The Bachelor and like marry. Like it's just awkward. It's a really awkward show.
Way. It feels impossible to come out happy, right? Because like, let's say that you come out and like you're two perfectly happy people
but like
in a couple, but like then the show airs and like you have to like
rewatch all the times you almost made bad decisions.
People tweet at you and post on your Facebook like for like how many months?
Yeah, it just seems uncomfortable. Like, I don't know.
Michael, let's wrap this up. What did you learn this week?
Sorry, I got distracted. You got to go first.
So I learned that we are way closer on a lot of things in Magic than I thought we were, and I'm really excited about doing training runs that we've done before on the show with just me and you.
Yeah, I'm excited too, and I think digging really deep into like I think this episode hopefully did a good job of identifying things that we think will make you better at Magic.
Yeah.
And even if it's kind of a slog, a lot of Magic is incremental improvement. So, like,
I think you're going to say a lot of Magic is a slog.
Well, it is. That's true too. I mean, everything that's incremental improvement is a slog, and I think that like recognizing that you can kind of get better bit by bit. You don't have to be John Finkel tomorrow. You could just like, I'm going to learn one thing about.
Here's the thing: you don't have to be John Finkel ever, because 14 Pro Tour updates is a lot.
Well, set lofty goals, right? I mean, there's no sense in saying the best I want to be is what I already am. So
yeah, but I totally settle for Owen Turtenwald.
Sure. All right, fair enough. You don't have to be Owen or John Finkel tomorrow. But I think that like just recognizing that the important thing is like setting a goal and working towards it rather than, you know, making this oh, well, I'll never get to the level I want to be at. The only way you can find out if you're capable of getting there is to try.
Yeah. Don't forget to check out this week on YouTube. We were going to be live streaming, limited time only. I literally had to tell Danny to clean his room so that he could stream from his bedroom today.
It would be funnier if it wasn't at all. Like if it just looked horrifying.
It's so funny, like looking at Danny's house looks like my house when I was like playing Magic as much as Danny. I was like, do you not have a desk? And he's like, well, there's a desk in here. And he like shows me the room on Google Hangouts. And it's just like this room with this table that has Magic cards stacked on stacks on stacks on stacks across the entire table. And I actually remember having that table.
So the really sick thing about having a girlfriend is you can't do that.
Oh, yeah. Since Devonar moved into my house, like, is there a Magic card on any surface of my house?
I literally have like 6 Magic cards in my house.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
You would think that, like, you're like, oh, that's so sad. Like, you don't have Magic cards.
No,
but it's like,
it is great.
It's actually just mono improvements. Like, we're looking at my man cave desk that we record on, and there's no Magic cards on it.
Perfect.
Right. Because there's 2 computers that, like, can play Magic on them. So
right. Yeah.
Why would I have Magic cards on my desk?
Yeah.
That's it for this week, everybody. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Don't forget to go to patreon.com/ccmtg and subscribe. Support the podcast any way that you can. Everything is appreciated. Thank you so much for listening this week, and we'll see you guys all next time.